It's 5 o'clock p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. New social distancing measures have taken effect in Seoul and the surrounding area. Also, it's now 2 weeks until the nationwide college entrance exam, so the authorities have announced special measures to make sure test takers can study and sit for the exam safely. Choi Won-jung reports.
The South Korean government has raised the social distancing level up a notch in response to the surge in COVID-19 in the capital. Starting Thursday, the Greater Seoul area will be under level 1.5 social distancing measures. The heightened measures like keeping a certain distance will be felt particularly in high-risk facilities such as bars, clubs, and religious facilities where only 30% capacity is allowed. In singing rooms, eating inside is not allowed anymore. Schools are also limiting their attendance to 2/3 the total student capacity. With 2 weeks left until the 2021 college entrance exam, health authorities are working to prevent large cluster infections from breaking out. According to the Education Ministry, starting on Thursday, a special virus control period will be in place for 2 weeks. During the period, the government will urge facilities such as study cafes, cram schools, and PC rooms to strengthen virus control measures. If a student tests positive from a cram school, the government said they will release information on the cram school to minimize the risk of infections. On Thursday, South Korea again saw more than 300 daily cases. The nation reported 343 new cases of COVID-19, a slight rise from Wednesday's numbers. There were 293 local transmissions on Thursday, and 50 were from overseas. 107 of those local transmissions were from Seoul alone. 59 cases were reported in Gyeonggi-do province and 11 in Incheon. 2 additional deaths were reported, raising the death toll to 498. The country has now seen almost 30,000 cases in total since the outbreak began. Choi Won-jung, Arirang News.
In other news, the U.S. House of Representatives has passed a pair of resolutions calling for a stronger South Korea-U.S. alliance. Approved on Wednesday, the resolutions underline the importance of the alliance in, quote, promoting peace and security in the Indo-Pacific region. One emphasizes the importance of the alliance and recognizes the contributions made by Korean Americans. The other, marking the 70th anniversary of the Korean War, highlights the transformation of the alliance into a mutually beneficial global partnership. With the pandemic putting so many people out of work, especially in the service sector, South Korea's household employment income in the third quarter was down by 1.1%. That's the biggest on-year decline for the third quarter on record. The income gap also widened. Kim Jae-hee has this report.
South Korea's household employment income fell in the third quarter from a year earlier, with the COVID-19 outbreak hammering the job market. According to Statistics Korea on Thursday, the monthly average household employment income in the July to September period this year was down by 1.1% compared to a year earlier. Although this is smaller than the 5.3% on-year fall seen in the second quarter, it marked the steepest on-year fall for the third quarter since records began in 2003. The average household business income also slipped by 1% on-year. However, the overall monthly average household income rose in the third quarter to over 5.3 million Korean won, or about $4,800, up 1.6% from the same period last year. This was due to a 17.1% increase in what's called transfer income, which refers to cash, goods, or services received from the government or other organizations.
Transfer income rose 17.1% in the third quarter compared to last year, thanks to public pensions, basic pension increases, unemployment benefits, and child allowance, as well as emergency aid given to the public and incentives to create jobs amid the pandemic.
There was also greater income inequality than last year, with those in low-income brackets seeing their income drop. Households in the lowest 20% income bracket saw their average monthly income in the third quarter fall by 1.1% from the same period last year, and the second lowest bracket saw a 1.3% drop. Only those in the top 60% saw their income go up, with top 20% seeing the largest rise. Total household spending also decreased on year amid the virus pandemic. Spending on food items, non-alcoholic beverages, and household goods increased, but spending on transport, entertainment, and education dropped as people prefer to stay home amid the outbreak. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you for making time today.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks in New York were down overnight. Positive vaccine news outweighed by the surge in coronavirus cases in the U.S. The S&P down by more than 1%. The NASDAQ down about 0.8%. What's the story in the global markets?
Okay, well, as you just mentioned, the U.S. markets were down. Dow also went down by 1.16%. And the U.S. press, U.S. newspapers are blaming the coronavirus. The coronavirus relief bill is going nowhere. The Congress and President Trump is not doing anything much. And President Trump is still not accepting the fact that he lost. So the uncertainty there is growing. And then in New York City, because they had a infection rate of higher than 3%, their schools are closing. And that seemed to be affecting the market as well, since most of these exchanges are in New York. And the New York Fed president, John Williams, has said that the U.S. is still in recession. So the press is stating that the stock market has fallen because of these factors. But on the other hand, if you look at the European markets, they basically see the same news. Now, coronavirus in Europe is getting slightly better, but still, there's nothing substantially different, but the European markets were up. So it seems to me that rather than representing just slight difference in how people feel about the coronavirus, it does seem like the market is sort of meandering, and any slight bit of news, good or bad, seem to have outsized effect. Now, the Asian market has been more mixed. Nikkei has gone down by 0.36%, and Hang Seng, the Hong Kong index, has gone down by 0.50%. Nikkei has gone down because Tokyo is now on high alert for, almost at the high alert for coronavirus. Hong Kong, there has been a lot of international criticism for cracking down on legislative council members. So that accounts for the negative movement on the Nikkei and the Hang Seng. But Shanghai does seem to have risen somewhat by 0.47%, at least so far during the day.
Well, here in Korea, the Kospi was down most of the day, but ended just barely higher. Retail investors, foreigners were buying today on both main indexes, institutions selling. What happened in the local markets?
Okay, well, as you just mentioned, the Kospi eked out a positive at the end of the day, so they rose by 0.07%. But we have to remember, Kospi is only about 2% from its historical high, which was in January 29th, 2018 at 2598.19. So there may be a reluctance to buy too much, since, well, the historical high does act as sort of a psychological barrier if there's really not that much good news. On the other hand, the individual investors do seem to be preparing to buy more if there's a positive trend upwards. The cash deposits to be used for stock purchases by individuals are at a historical high at 65.1 trillion won, near historical highs, I should say. And just a few days ago, it was lower by 10 trillion won, just at the beginning of November. So the amount of money that the individual investors are ready to spend at the stock market is at or near historical highs. Problem is, because Kospi is near such historical high, I think people are being very careful. Now, Kosdaq market, it rose by 0.96%, and again, there, individuals and foreigners bought today.
Now, the exchange rate's come down so much in the past several weeks as the dollar weakened. The exchange rate is back up today, though, a bit, to around 11.14, 11.15. What do you make of these moves, Professor, and what's your outlook?
Okay, well, the usual trend when the global economy is getting more stable is that the U.S. dollar gets weaker and the other currencies become stronger. Especially the yuan seemed to have gotten stronger in the last few days, and that has induced Korean won to rise as well. Since the popular opinion now is that Korean won tends to follow the Chinese yuan instead of the U.S. dollar. But the changes today, which resulted in a fall from yesterday's 1133.6 to 11.03.88 today, yesterday to today, does seem to lie with the government's warning. The government has sent warnings that the exchange rates seem to be strengthening too quickly, so they did send some warning that they want the exchange rate to not rise as much, and that seemed to have had a big effect today. Now, it's not entirely clear right now if there has been actual purchases by the government or the Bank of Korea today, but it seems that the jawboning by the government authorities has worked, at least for today.
Got it. All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
The South Korean government has rolled out yet another set of measures for the real estate market, this time to bring down the price of home leases, especially in the Seoul area. Over the next 2 years, it's going to supply 114,000 homes nationwide, in part by converting vacant commercial property to residential. Jeong has the details.
The South Korean government plans to supply 114,000 rental homes nationwide over the next 2 years in a bid to reduce the soaring cost of jeonse, a rental agreement that uses a huge lump sum deposit instead of monthly rent. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi announced at a ministerial meeting on the property market on Thursday that 70,000 of those homes would be in the capital and surrounding areas, including 35,000 in Seoul.
They will be provided in part by buying newly built houses and leasing them out, and by building or leasing public homes.
The government plans to provide 49,000 homes, or about 40% of the total, by June next year. It also plans to turn vacant shopping malls, offices, and lodging facilities into residential spaces to create an extra 13,000 units for rent by 2022, including 5,400 in Seoul.
With low rental fees, hotels will be transformed into high-quality housing for single-person households and young people.
However, an expert says this will not be enough to solve the shortage of homes available for jeonse renting.
Renovating hotel rooms for residential purposes won't be enough for 2 to 4 person households. Last year, Banekia Hotel in the Jongno-gu district was provided for young people to rent, but a lot of the units there are still vacant.
Meanwhile, the national average house price went up by 0.25% in the third week of November. That's the largest weekly increase since records began 8.5 years ago. Experts say house prices have increased due to the soaring jeonse costs, which have led more people to buy low and medium-priced homes. Jeong, Arirang News.
Airlines in South Korea have been given approval to offer flights to nowhere to help them get through the virtual shutdown of international travel in the pandemic and to restore consumer confidence. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said today that the flights will be authorized for a period of 12 months. The flights won't technically leave the country, so passengers won't have to worry about COVID-19 tests or quarantine. There will, however, be strict measures in place in terms of disinfecting, mask wearing, and so on. And another benefit, passengers will be allowed to do some duty-free shopping. So far, flights to nowhere are expected to be offered by 6 carriers, including Korean Air and Asiana Airlines, and should be ready to start by the end of this month. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.